Hey all, Elio here, and with less than a week to 7.2, I thought now would be a fun time to dive into the trailer for the upcoming patch and refresh some of you on the information available to us from 7.0 and 7.1. Also, this will be a little bit more off the cuff than usual, so be ready for that. Without further ado, let's begin. Because the dialogue that is playing over the top of the patch, I suspect to be more tied to the MSQ, and the first section is more about the Occult Crescent, I'm going to focus on the Occult Crescent visuals and come back around to the MSQ related stuff at the end, as there is an enormous amount to talk about. From the immediate jump, we have a really cool sight, which is our first shot of the Occult Crescent, from the first of the two maps that we're going to get. The first being in 7.2, and the second being later on the 7.x series. But more exciting than a new exploration zone, at least to a lore nerd like me, is that we have Amdapori Ruins. Me and the other members of the Final Fantasy XIV lore book club that we host over on the Eorzean Archives Discord have been speculating on the 5th Astral Era Nemean ruins we've seen in promotional art for the Shades Triangle. And this shot, and more shots later in the trailer, only further confirm that not just are there ruins of Nim, but it makes it crystal clear there's also ruins of Amdapor and Mach, which calling them ruins might actually be a bit of a stretch, as other than the Nemean ruins, the structures seem very intact. If you're wondering how I know it's Amdaporian, look at the spires and the textures, of which you can see the identical stylings of Amdapor Keep and the Lost City. In case you don't know what I'm talking about, or don't do optional dungeons, which, I'm gonna be real, you should. Here's a quick overview of the 5th Astral Era. About 2 Astral Eras ago, roughly around 3,000 to 1,600 years ago, during the 5th Astral Era, there was multiple city-states in Eorzea. The 4 you may have heard of were Nim, Amdapor, Mach, and Scala. By the end of the 5th Astral Era, only the first 3 were left standing. Scala and 8 others that we don't know the names for had been conquered or destroyed. To cut a long story short, Mach tried to conquer Nim and Amdapor, kicking off a war of the Magi, and eventually that led to the 6th Umbral Calamity of Water, which led to the oceans rising and massive tidal waves. If you care to know more about that history, check out our videos over on the channel, because it's all probably going to play at least somewhat of a big role in the Shades Triangle. Speaking of Mach, in the next shot we have not only a Machi pyramid, but housing structures that come from Dunscaith, and towers that you can see from the Weeping City. What's interesting is that the pyramid itself does not have a clear top like the one in the Weeping City, where Ozma was stored. Whether that's because there are walls that are intentionally up, or that it doesn't have the same function, anyone's guess. The next shot is what I'm almost certain to be our starting zone, something like a Genghis from Bosnia, or potentially it's in the zone, like with Animos. I think the former is more likely thanks to a later shot where we see a sort of in-zone base of operations. It does seem like it may be connected to the island though, since you can see the same trees, but maybe it's a launch point in its own distinct island with the same vegetation. More important than that is the architecture is all Nemean. The water features and arches are all either echoing or downright asset reusing models that can be found in Bronze Lake or in the Wanderer's Palace. From there, we go to a screen full of boobies. Blue-footed boobies, to be exact, and a Laminsan ship. You can tell it's Laminsan not just from the design, but because large ships like it can't even get into Tuliolal due to the coral reefs. On its deck are the Warrior of Light and one 100-year-old Roganin who looks far more youthful than I ever will. Ketenram the Blue, or Tonqua, as the Turali know him. From this and in a later shot, it's clear he'll be a major part of the exploration of the Shades Triangle, and with near 8 decades of life in Tural and as an explorer, I'd have thought he'd ventured into these islands before now. Maybe he has, or maybe there was something historically preventing him from doing so. Since Ketenram had a very small role in the MSQ itself, it's nice to explore his character, since he's actually been a mainstay of the lore as far back as A Realm Reborn, where his exploits made up a majority of what we even knew of the New World. It also looks like there's going to be a note system with juicy lore tidbits based on the live letter. Hopefully it's done a bit better than Bosnia's version, which dumped most of its story in them and basically was required reading to make sense of what was going on. One nice thing is that the notes seem to have dates on them, but this note that we see from the live letter only has dates that have been public knowledge since, well, Encyclopedia Eorzea Volume 1, which has been out for about 9 years. So don't have any hopes of the time bubble popping anytime soon. That said, from some evidence in 7.0, it seems like it's been somewhere roughly around 3 years since the end of A Realm Reborn. I have to wonder, what was this healthy looking visage for someone his age? Did Ketenram happen to find the Fountain of Youth somewhere in Tural? I swear, if that actually is a story point, I'm gonna laugh. The next shot is a seeming Animo-style base camp I mentioned earlier, with a tent, some more Nemean architecture, and a unique-looking aetheryte of a style we have never seen before. Aetherytes as a technology were not widely available during the 5th Astral Era, and with a small crystal sphere at its core, it must be an extraordinarily dense crystal, or have some pretty powerful magic augmenting it, since a large crystal is typically the fundamental requirement for any kind of teleportation. Another possibility is that it may have a relatively short range, which would make sense seeing as it's going to be limited to if you're already instanced in the map. There's also a dead-looking crystal on the right of the screen that we see another version of later on in the trailer. The one last thing I want to mention is that other than the 5th Astral Era structures we can see throughout the trailer and promotional materials, we also see what seems like bubbles in the sky, and while not clear in most of the shots, in a few you can catch a glimpse of what looks like landscapes. They kind of also remind me of the spheres of darkness that are the domains of the 13th. There really isn't really a way to tackle this topic without talking out of order, because there's just so much context, but these bubbles are interesting, not just for what they may be depicting, but also because the sheer fact that there are 5th Astral Era structures sitting an ocean away from where they should be, and for the most part in pretty decent shape, 1600 years after the fall of their corresponding civilizations, and that's just wacky. Are they displaced in time? Did some of the Nemeans and Maki and Amdapori flee west before the rising floodwaters of the 6th Umbral Calamity? Or could this have been an outpost from a more peaceful time between the three? Other than the 5th Astral Era, there is another important 5 to talk about, Final Fantasy V. This entire exploration seems to be based off of Final Fantasy V, with the Crescent Isle coming from FF5, as well as the battle theme we hear in the trailer and in the live letter. The other content, like the 48-man raid, the Forked Tower, the Phantom Jobs, which all come from 5, and a lot of the enemies as well. The final shot of the Black Bard section of the trailer is a host of Warriors of Light running through an open field with the Brachiosaurus around. These are a Final Fantasy VI reference, but have also popped up in the Diadem once upon a time. It's good to see them back as more than a mount, though. But things start to get more juicy here with the statue that's specifically in the style of Amdapor. Amdapor was famous for creating Soulkin statues, things like the lion, Caribou, and demon wall out of stone, and bringing them to life with magic. The statues of Voidrogia that tend to be possessed by Voidsent can be found all over Amdapor City and Keep, but the style of stonework in the background is less directly Amdapori, though I swear I have seen it somewhere before, and I double-checked but couldn't find it in any 5th Astral related locations. It does seem like this area is at least partially submerged, which might hint that rather than all the locations being distinctly one culture or another, there might be places that are a mashup of any number, or any of the 8 other 5th Astral nations we hadn't heard of, if not something completely new or other. Next shot is a Warriors of Light passing a Stone of Light that we saw earlier in the base camp, though that one seemed to be deactivated and this one seems to explode with light as we pass by it. I'm guessing these stones act as a kind of checkpoint where we respawn if we die. Also, notably, the coloring kind of is reminiscent of Auracite rather than crystal. The next Amdaporian creation shows up with a demon wall, but unlike the one in Amdapor Keep, this has 2 extra heads bound in cloth and a red tint. Something more reminiscent of Maki magic and aesthetics than Amdaporian. We also know from the Weeping City that the Mach tried to replicate Amdapor's Soulkin magics. Oh, I forgot to mention, the demon walls are not void sent, they're actually just living statues. This area clearly seems to be some kind of dungeon, and around 13 players are fighting together. Assuming it's not the Forked Tower, this could be its own interesting mini-instance. And it's also the same room that we see the Voidrogia statues in. You know, I also get a feeling that a lot of players are going to get knocked off the platform from this fight based on the flipping demon wall that's knocking people away. Stay safe out there. Next up is a white minotaur with wings and stone and light effects. Normally I'd go with the this is Amdaporian, but the distinct fact that the eyes are dark holes actually makes it more like a Sin Eater than a Soulkin. I speculated years ago in a video that the Amdapor with its penchant for white magics and umbrality might have at some point inadvertently or intentionally created a Sin Eater. This matching with Caribou and Forgiven Dissonance being the same models. Now, the possibility there is just asset reuse, but it is an interesting thing to think about. It's either that, or since this location doesn't really look like anywhere else, and we are dealing with places outside of time, maybe this enemy or location is an echo of or a displacement of somewhere else, maybe the first or another reflection. Though Sin Eaters, as far as we know, being native exclusively to the first. The only real Occult Crescent related story progression we see in the trailer, beyond the arrival, is here in these Nemean ruins with an eerie light. where the Warrior of Light and Ketenram open a chest, and with something dark literally, and probably figuratively, locked away. Nim had plenty of run-ins with Maki Voidsent, like Bitoso, so this could either be something that was used against them, or created by them to fight back. Maybe something tied to the whole displacement of these locations. You know, I only thought of it just now, but Final Fantasy V has a major plot point about the merging of worlds. The story here might be echoing something of that, with two worlds, or times, being merged together. Of course, the merging of worlds is already present in the MSQ, clearly, so it's on the devs' minds. For now, we're going to skip over these glitches and come back around to them when we talk about the MSQ. This shot of the two teams of Warrior of Lights fighting across the bridge is almost certainly the Forked Tower. The tower in the background on the left may be a branch point where the two teams split, each taking a tower, like in Final Fantasy V. This one on the left, and another one off to the right that we can't see. The enemy choice is really interesting, with a bunch of Skull and Old Ones on each bridge, and the rest seem to be some type of Ashkin or Voidsent. The flames on the ground behind the group seem to be spreading, meaning you'll have to keep pulling adds quickly, and if you start to fall behind, you may get overwhelmed. If you enjoyed casts from Lacus Latore in Bosnia, or the Baldessian Arsenal in Eureka, the Forked Tower should be a really fun time, but I would recommend going in prepared, as it's going to be a real challenge. Speaking of being prepared, Phantom Jobs. First, we have some Nimian ruins with what looks like the base outpost in the background. This area we're standing on can actually be seen early in the trailer from far away. The caster in the shot may actually be using our first Phantom Job skill, as this common effect I don't believe is a current spell any job can use. I will go out on a limb and guess it's the Black Mage Phantom Job, since it's also a spell you'll be able to choose in PvP with the 7.2 changes. The next enemy I'm also guessing is the Forked Tower, as you can see the tower and the arches from the previous shot in this one. This enemy I am also certain is a nod to another Final Fantasy, but racking my brain, I cannot recall. So let me know if you know in the comments. My guess is this may be a mini-boss of sorts outside the entrance to one of the towers that you have to defeat before ascending. Kind of like the first third of the Baldessian Arsenal. I have no idea what's going on in this next area. You can see the same wall sconces as you could with the Demon Wall Room, but now you have what looks more like technological equipment rather than purely aetheological, and the enemies all seem to be Soulkin of various kinds. The architecture doesn't mimic any one group of the 5th Astral Era, but weirdly it has accents from all three, with the Amdaporian braided pattern on the rings in the wall, and also Maki black stonework and square patterning. Maybe it's a structure that's a fusion of various groups, or maybe it's its own thing entirely. Either way, looks like a fun fight, and based on the shots before, I wonder if this will be the base room of one of the Forked Towers. Now, this is for sure an example of Phantom Jobs, and that's a scholar using what I think is the Phantom Ranger, since summoning animals is one of the first skills available to the Ranger in Final Fantasy V. In this case, it's a unicorn. I'm curious if when you use it, you get a random effect like in Final Fantasy V, which could make it powerful but inconsistent. A reminder that any job can take any Phantom Job, so you could be a monk with a monk Phantom Job, or a black mage with a white mage Phantom Job, etc. And now comes the last shot of the Occult Crescent, and it's a shot of Nim with architecture either directly taken from Bronze Lake, or at least echoing it. One thing worth noting is that the Nimian site actually seems more like ruins than the other locations we saw. As a lore nerd and a lover of 5th Astral Eras and exploration zones, the whole Shades Triangle is going to be a blast. Speaking of, forgive the self-promotion, but we host exploration zone events, farming events, and lore book clubs and more over at the Eorzean Archives Discord. All are welcome, and we like helping out new folk, so come join. Cosmic Exploration. I won't go over all the basics of Cosmic Exploration, but loosely this is a new version of the Diadem where we explore a new star each patch. Although this first patch is just setting up our moon base as a launching point into the Sea of Stars. This is for gatherers and crafters and should be a ton of fun. It will also be a way to level both if you haven't already. One fun thing about this shot is that they turned to Theros so that Tyral is facing us. The moon base which we are setting up will be in one of the other Mare on the moon. Basically, somewhere away from Mare Lamentorum. This time around, the Loporrits are the ones leading the mission, with at least one named Scanning Way getting us to join in. I think, however, that Scanning Way might not be this red Loporrit and instead one of the normal colored ones. The reason is that the red Loporrit is identical in design to Naming Way, a Loporrit that was hinted at in a minion that came from Encyclopedia Eorzea Volume 1. This may be us finally getting him in game. This red-clothed Loporrit design is also a nod back to the Hummingways, which were the Final Fantasy IV inspiration for the Loporrits. Okay, so is anybody else excited to ride a mecha? Because we get to see the mechas, and we'll be able to pilot them during Cosmic Exploration. So if you like Gundam, get ready to get crafting. Not everyone can pilot one at once, but you'll be able to build up tokens to increase your chances. Even if you don't get to pilot one mech, you'll be able to support them on the ground. We also see in these shots the progression of the moon base over the course of a patch. And what will happen is, as players contribute, the moon base will get bigger and bigger until it's fully completed. Look, cosmic exploration is going to be a lot of fun, and having just finished the Diadem and the Pterodon mount, oh god, what have I done with my life? I'm really looking forward to it. And I think it's going to be very approachable patch to patch, rather than everything being one specific instance. You can approach them as separate, distinct instances. And who knows, you might discover a whole new type of content you love. We won't be getting it until a month after the patch drops, though. Oh, and the Occult Crescent will be 2 months after patch drop. But there is going to be a lot to do in 7.2 already. Plus, getting caught up on anything you might have been meaning to do, like checking out old exploration zones. Okay, I'm actually going to skip forward and tackle raid images and then after the MSQ as one whole thing, since the next bit cuts back and forth between them. And here we are starting off with a fight against an unknown opponent with an unknown creature. But I have thoughts. I think this might actually be Brute Bomber. And I think this might be the M7 fight and either the result of or going to cause psychonecrosis. The enemy itself seems to be a combination of an Cyclops or a Catobleps, both of which you can see in Heritage Found, and some sort of seedkin like a Belladonna. The reason I think this is Brute Bomber is the red hair and the fact that we specifically are shown the 3 other contestants and their creatures, but not a 4th, despite seeing 4 fights. We also see in the promotional material Brute Bomber show up in a couple of images. This might be a fight that helps emphasize the long-term dangers of using souls in the way that they do in the Arcadian, and how it can cause major physiological and psychological corruption. It would go along so far with the themes of Arcadian and 7.1, as well as the M4S Phase 2 corruption and changes when overusing souls. The reason I think this is M7 is that it is an elevation of the story. But I'm fairly certain that M8 will be our Fenris Bolthound boy, and M5 will be Dancing Green, the Disco Frog Bum Boy who is now my favorite. The reason I think Dancing Green is M5 is that Yoshi P showed him off in the live letter, and typically we are shown the first fight in each tier when that happens. And if I'm right about M5 and M8, that would mean that our Belladonna Nightmare is either M6 or M7, but I think M6 will be our next candidate. And here they are, the Splatoon Lalafell. The soul they are using is a flan, or pudding, or any of the various names that they end up using for that type of enemy throughout Final Fantasy XIV and other Final Fantasies. And as we can see in this image, it looks like they're putting that etheric goo to use to become a Pictomancer paint tracer. It's not my wheelhouse to overly guess on later mechanics, but based on a later shot where they are ethereally connected to a painting, I suspect they're bringing visuals into the arena that cause specific effects, like the raining grasslands with lightning. For M8, we have our discount Digimon. I mean furry Gundam. Okay, well, you get what I mean. I suspect this is our M8 because A, he's got the protag energy, and B, the shot of him later looks suspiciously like either a phase transition for Savage or a big attack in normal, the kind you tend to only see in the final part of a tier. The story for this tier should be good, but I would expect it to be mostly about diving further into the psychonecrosis and other aspects around the Arcadian that we have seen thus far. If you look at every other raid, the first tier establishes a threat, the second tier dives a bit deeper into it, and the third tier goes crazy for a climax. And last, yes, the disco dancing bun boy, Dancing Green. Honestly, no notes. The boy is channeling that 70s Greninja energy, and I love it. Actually, there is a final note I have here for the raids, and it's that I don't know if this shot of the Azemstone is meant to be for MSQ or for the raids, since either really works. That said, I would probably guess the MSQ. Maybe this isn't merely us summoning phantoms to our side, but it tends to be when there's actual non-combat cutscenes with the Azemstone, it's coming from the MSQ. Hey all, Elio here. I have just realized that this video is already at 20 minutes and I was trying to keep it brief and I have not even started the MSQ section yet. And the MSQ is going to be as long, if not longer. And I solo edit these things, so if I want this to get done, I need to put this out now and work on other things when I have more free time this weekend. I'm also trying to do my April Fool's video that I do every year, and the clock is running out of time. So I'm going to split this video into this video and the MSQ video next that should be out likely on Monday. Thanks for your patience. In addendum to this, as some of you may have noticed, the channel has not exactly put out the most videos the past year as I was going through a bit of a health issue. I'm doing much better now, and videos should be more regular. However, there'll be intermittent periods as my brain is still healing. that videos may come out less or more frequently. That said, I'm really excited for an April Fool's video and to work on the future projects for all of this year, as well as playing 7.2 and beyond with Dawntrail with all the people over at our Discord and you guys. So just know that for those of you who have stuck around or have checked out our stuff, especially this past year while I've been in poor health, I really appreciate it and thank you very much. So I'll catch you on the trailer analysis for the MSQ very, very soon, and see you all in 7.2. Stay safe, Archons. Thanks for watching.